Come Saturday night, eyes across New England and the nation will be glued to the Patriots and their playoff duel against the Indianapolis Colts. And while the postseason brings thrills, there's also serious risk in every game. And for football's youngest players, the risk is greater and the recovery is more delicate. The Kansas City Chiefs lost more than a playoff game in last weekend's defeat to the Indianapolis Colts.
And that will be a scary moment for Andy Reid and Chiefs fans with the franchise player on the ground.
That hit on running back Jamal Charles wasn't the only scary moment on the field. 3 other players left the game with concussions.
And again, we're not going to speculate, but what you saw on the sideline was concussion protocol.
Those were among the almost 150 concussions suffered by NFL players this season. But when WGBH News asked New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady if concussions were a concern to him, he had this to say.
I don't think about it at all. Yeah, I'm not overly concerned.
The sports season will ramp up even more with the start of the Winter Olympics next month. And with that comes the risk for more concussions.
He was hammered right near the Bruins bench, and this looks scary. A scary-looking sight.
Yet, according to experts, those facing the highest risk of concussion aren't pro quarterbacks or Olympic medalists. A new study from Children's Hospital found yet more evidence that failing to properly treat kids and teens who've suffered a concussion can cause irreversible harm. I'm joined now by the author of that study. Dr. William Meehan is the director of the Sports Concussion Clinic at Boston Children's Hospital. His finding appears in the journal Pediatrics. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
But we've known for a while that kids are particularly susceptible, vulnerable. What is new in your study? What did you discover?
Well, about 2004, the International Consensus on Concussion in Sports recommended something called cognitive rest. And it meant that if an athlete had been concussed, they should reduce the amount of time they spend using their memory, concentrating, focusing, things that demand mental focus. There was no evidence for that recommendation, and as a result, the implementation of it was variable. Some doctors weren't recommending cognitive rest at all.
For kids?
For kids or adults, actually, and other doctors were recommending the athletes lay in a dark room and don't do anything at all until they're completely recovered. Ours is the first study to show really valuable prospective evidence showing that cognitive rest works to help recover, but also that people doing no cognitive rest, minimal cognitive rest, or moderate cognitive rest really recovered about the same rate, and it was only those doing the highest levels of cognitive activity that dragged out their recovery.
Okay, so it's one thing to get an adult to do cognitive rest, but how do you get a kid to do that?
It's hard, and it's not full cognitive rest. The first 3 to 5 days after injury actually is. So we tell them we want them to stay home from school, to avoid doing their homework, to avoid playing video games and games like chess or board games that demand concentration.
What about TV?
Television, to be honest, probably demands less cognitive activity than almost anything else. So yeah, so we let them do that. I probably wouldn't watch murder mysteries or games like Jeopardy, but you could watch regular television. After the first 3 to 5 days, we recommend they start going back to school, but they might have to limit the amount that they do. They might need extra time to complete tests and quizzes. We recommend they defer high-stakes testing that count for a big part of their grades and those kind of things until they're fully recovered. And they stay below the level that causes their symptoms and gradually increase the amount they're doing.
So if they don't do this, is there long-term effects? Can they have some permanent damage if they don't do this cognitive rest?
Hopefully not long-term. So most of them, certainly all the athletes in our study, eventually did have full resolution of their symptoms, but it took a lot longer for those who didn't limit their cognitive activity. The real risk of permanent problems is if they are to get struck in the head again before they're fully recovered, then they are at risk for permanent problems.
You know, I'm just watching some of that Olympic stuff. I mean, we were not allowed to use Olympic video, but ski jumpers, ice skaters. Ski jumpers wear helmets, ice skaters don't. These people are often very, very young themselves. And then you hear somebody like Tom Brady with such a dismissive attitude. You know, we love Tom Brady, but I mean, it's these big athletes. Shouldn't it be more of it? I mean, I know Frontline just did this thing, League of Denials. I mean, but isn't it the point where everybody should be talking about it?
Yeah, I think people should be aware of it. It's interesting you brought up helmets. Helmets, in fact, don't decrease your risk of concussion. Yeah, and it's really the spinning of the brain that causes the injury. And in fact, when you introduce helmets to a sport, there's some evidence that people play more aggressively and get more aggressive, and probably the rates of concussion are more likely to go up than down.
All right, Dr. William Meehan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, this is just the latest in our series of in-depth reports on concussions. For more on the long-term risks of traumatic head injuries, go to to find the latest innovations designed to prevent them, visit our website, WGBHnews.org.